Hi, I'm Jackie Elgar, the Pamela and Peter Voss, head of Asian Conservation, and I just want to welcome you all to this lecture series for today, which is basically about Asian paintings, oversized Asian paintings, and how they're treated. The impetus for this series of talks today is actually Preserving Nirvana, which is one of our exhibitions that's currently in our Asian gallery. It's a conservation in action, and I hope if you haven't seen it or followed us on Facebook or came to some of the key conservation treatment parts that you will at least at some point go and see the piece today or in the future, because it's been stretch drying and you can see it face up in all its glory. I just really would like to thank all of you for coming, because this, for us, is sort of a celebration of nearing the end of that project. And I am indebted to all the speakers who are with us today, because they really have rounded out the lectures with not only the Japanese side, but also Korean art and Chinese art. So I really appreciate all of you. We're going to have two lectures first that pertain to a Neihan or Nirvana type painting, usually in English is called The Death of Buddha. The first will be our keynote speaker, and then that will be followed by the MFA's conservation studio. And then we will have a brief I guess, respite for 10 minutes, and then we will come back and have 3 more lectures. So I just wanted to give you that sort of idea of how the day will go. But our first speaker is Naohachi Usami. He is the president of the Usami Shokaku-do in Kyoto, Japan. And I have to say, this studio was founded in the 1780s. It's a privately owned studio. Mr. Usami is the 9th generation. So that's quite wonderful in and of itself. And he's going to be speaking about a very large Neihan, much larger than the MFA's piece. And accompanying him will be Andrew Hare, who is the supervisor, conservator of East Asian paintings at the Freer Sackler Galleries in Washington, D.C. And I'd like to invite them up now to start the symposium. And I should also say that Andrew studied in the Usami Shokaku-do under Mr. Usami's father.
この度、ボストンの姉妹都市、京都から参りました宇佐美直八と申します。どうぞよろしくお願いいたします。
My name is Naohachi Usami. For this conference, I have come from Kyoto, the sister city of Boston. I'd like to thank you for your attention to my speech today.
今回は、新如堂所蔵の、資本着色大涅槃図の、修理について、話をさせていただきます。
Today, I will speak about the conservation treatment of a large Death of Buddha painting done in colors on paper from the Shinyodo Temple in Kyoto.
新如堂は、京都市内に、ありまして、正式には、霊生山、新正極楽寺といいます。比叡山延暦寺を本山とする、天台宗の、お寺です。
Located in Kyoto City, the Shinyodo Temple, properly known as Reishōzan Shinyo Gokurakuji, belongs to the Tendai sect of Buddhism with its head temple Endryakuji on Mount Hiei.
この大涅槃図は、1709年、宝永6年、三井家の女性たちの寄進により、宋円宮や開宝優勝らによって、制作された資本着色の、大涅槃図であります。画面の下の部分全域には多くの、動物や魚類、昆虫などが手向けの花をくわえたり、手に持ったりして釈迦の死を営んでいる様子が描かれて、その数は127種類にも及び、涅槃図では日本最多であろうと言われております。1734年、享保19年と 1897年、明治30年に修復された記録があります。修理前の全体の寸法は、丈622センチ、幅461.2センチ、そして重量は61キログラムです。
The Neihan, or Description of the Death of the Historical Buddha, was painted in color on paper by the artists Soengu and Kaiho Yusho in 1709, funded by donations raised by women of the Mitsui family. In the lower half of the painting are 127 types of animals, sea life, and insects bringing flower tributes to the dying Buddha, more creatures than in any other Japanese example of this subject matter that are known. The painting was recorded as having been remounted in 1734 and again in 1897. The overall dimensions of the mounting are 20 feet 5 inches high by 15 feet 2 inches wide. It weighed 61 kilos.
これは、本堂の中で搬出前に破損状態の確認を作業をしているところです。
So this photo shows inspecting the painting in the main hall of the temple prior to treatment.
搬出前には本堂の中で僧侶によってお経を唱えられました。
The painting was removed following the recitation of a sutra by the monks of the temple.
真如堂の僧侶とともに大涅槃図を本堂から搬出するところです。
And this is a slide showing the monks carrying the scroll from the temple.
真如堂の僧侶とともに大涅槃図を本堂から同じく搬出して移動しているところです。
And here the priests leading a procession to take the scroll out of the temple.
そして美術品の専用車両に積み込みをしているところです。
And then loading the scroll into the art handler's truck.
この涅槃図はサイズが大きいために京都市内のホールを借りてそこで大涅槃図をかけました。
Because of the unusually large size of the painting, the pre-treatment photography was carried out in a hall rented in Kyoto.
そのホールで修理前の全体の写真撮影およびに細かな部分撮影をしました。
So during that process, the painting was photographed overall, and then many detail photos were taken.
そうしまして、宇佐美昇格堂の作業場に搬入するところです。
And here it is being carried into the main studio of the Usami Shokakudo.
地下の特別搬入口からウインチを使い作業場に搬入しているところです。
And this is them using a winch to bring the scroll up from the outside and through a window into the studio on the second floor.
最初の仕事としましては、煮川水を使用しまして、本紙の絵の具の剥落止めを行いました。
The first step in actual treatment was the consolidation of pigments, for which a dilute solution of animal skin glue was used.
そしてこの大涅槃図の掛け軸についている紐や金具を取り外しました。
And then treatment of the mounting began with the separation of the braided hanging cord and the metal fittings from the mount.
本紙と表層切れ字の切り離す作業を行っているところです。
In the next section, the painting and the mounting were separated.
そしてその掛け軸の上と下についている中軸と表目を取り外しているところです。
And then the upper hanging stave and lower roller rod were also removed from the mounting structure.
総裏紙、中裏紙など裏内紙を除去しました。そして総裏紙の次の層には麻布で裏打ちをされていました。これは少しでも丈夫にするつもりで麻布を使われたと推測します。
The outer, inner, and primary linings of the paper were removed. Also, unusually, a lining of hemp fabric had been adhered between the outer and inner layers of the lining structure. I believe this lining was added to strengthen the mounting structure overall.
本紙の素材に近い和紙にて形質部、損傷部を補修しました。
And then losses in the artwork were filled with repair patches of paper similar to that of the original.
このような修復作業で接着剤と使います小麦粉でんぷんのり、新のりとも言いますけれども、それを井戸水に小麦粉でんぷんのりを入れ、小麦粉でんぷんを入れて約1時間炊きます。でこののり炊きは3日に1度ぐらい行っております。
So the paste, which is the main adhesive used in the mounting of scrolls, was prepared from fresh well water and wheat starch powder and then cooked for approximately an hour. This procedure is done every 3 days or so that we have a supply of fresh paste to use in the treatment.
でのり炊きが終わりましたら、このような亀に入れて一晩寝かして冷やします。そして、またこれとはまた別に、毎年1月20日に大寒という一番寒い時に炊いたのりを約10年間保存します。こののりを古のりといい、掛け軸や巻物の裏打ちに使用する大事なのりがあります。
The cooked paste is then poured into a glazed ceramic crock and cooled overnight. In regard to paste, not just this news paste, but another type of paste known as aged paste is made every year around the coldest part of the year, typically late January, early February, and is then stored in a similar fashion. It is aged for approximately 10 years. This aged paste is a very important part of making hanging scrolls and hand scrolls.
本紙の裏面より新のりをつけた美濃紙にて肌裏打ちを行いました。
The back of the artwork was given its first relining with amino paper applied with freshly prepared wheat starch paste.
その次には本紙の裏から細く切った美濃紙で折れた部分を補強しました。
Creased areas in the painting were strengthened by the application of thinly cut strips of minnow paper.
次に同じく本紙の裏面より古のりをつけたミス紙にて裏打ちを行いました。
Supplementary linings of the artwork were applied with misu paper and 10-year-old aged paste.
これも同じく裏から裏打ちを行っているところです。
And here again, we're looking at the application of those linings to the back of the painting.
そして次は本紙の補修をした箇所に地色補彩をしているところです。
And then repair patches that were applied to the painting were toned to match the ground color of surrounding areas.
多くの種類の表具の切れ字より所有者と相談をしまして選んだ切れ字を裁断し、その表層切れ字の裏面より新のりをつけた美濃紙で裏打ちをしているところです。
The choice of mounting silks was made from a large selection and in consultation with the owners of the painting. For the primary lining, minnow paper was supplied with freshly prepared wheat starch paste.
続いて表層切れ字の裏面より古のりをつけたミス紙にて裏打ちをしているところです。
And then more supplementary linings were applied to the mounting silks using misu paper and 10-year aged paste.
本紙の周りに裏打ちされた表層切れ字を取り付けているところです。
And then once the parts of the mounting were all lined, and this process was completed, the silk borders were added around the painting.
この写真も同じく付け回しという作業をしているところです。
And here again, another area where they're applying the they're applying the silk borders around the painting.
表具全体の裏面に古糊をつけたミス紙にて中裏打ちを行っているところです。
Once the painting and the silk borders were all attached, an inner lining covering the entire mounting structure was added using, again, misu paper and aged wheat starch paste.
同じく表具全体に古糊をつけたミス紙にて裏打ちをしているところです。
Another slide showing you the application of the lining papers over the entire mounting structure using, again, the misu paper and aged paste.
続いて、表具全体の裏面に糊をつけた古糊をつけた裏紙にて総裏を打っているところです。
And then an outer lining over the entire mounting structure was applied with the Uda paper and aged paste. Here, a strip of the thin silk is placed at the top of the mounting.
この写真も同じく総裏打ちをしているところであります。これが表具全体の最後の裏打ちとなります。
And then the final border, lining is applied over the entire painting and its silk borders with the Uda paper using aged paste. This is the last lining.
最初から表具の裏面に貼り付けてましたお裏書きを補修をしたところです。
And then the inscription that had been on the back of the previous mounting was removed and relined. This inscription is an important part. すみません。
はい。この裏書きはこの掛け軸の歴史資料なのでとても大事なものです。
This inscription is a part of the historical record of the scroll and is therefore a very important part.
修理しましたお裏書きを元の同じ場所に貼り込んでいるところです。
Once the inscription was removed and repaired, it was pasted on the back of the new mounting structure in the same place.
これも同じくお裏書きを貼り込んでいるところです。
And here again, we're looking at a different view of that inscription being set into place and adhered using beading brushes.
これは掛け軸の一番上に取り付ける標目というところでありまして、この標目が反らないように3本の杉材を合わせて制作しました。
This is a drawing showing you the hanging stave, a very important part of the structure of a hanging scroll, and that it supports the entire top of the mounting. For this conservation treatment, a new hanging stave was prepared from sections of Japanese cedar wood. In order to make the hanging stave resistant to warping, 3 pieces of cedar were adhered together, then shaped into this half-circular form.
これは中軸といいまして表具の一番下に取り付ける軸でして、これも杉材でできております。で同じく反らないようにこれは6本の木を合わせまして、またその中をくり抜きまして、そのくり抜いたところに3本の細い板、柱のようなものを入れまして、その軸全体を軽量化いたしました。
As well, at the bottom of the mounting structure is the roller rod. And for this treatment, a new roller rod was prepared from sections of Japanese cedar. And again, to avoid straining the mounting with excessive weight, the center of the roller was hollowed out. Also, to keep the roller from warping, 6 pieces of wood were glued together, and then to keep it light, just discs of wood were inserted along the length of the cavity in the roller, so that it would remain stable and yet be light in weight.
その中軸の両端に金軸を取り付けるにあたりまして、そこをこう削って調整しているところです。
And here, a special knife is being used to trim down the ends of the rod to prepare it for the addition of decorative knobs.
今回、修理にあたり、所有者の新如堂様の方で書かれた、修理名のお裏書きを中軸に貼り付けているところです。
This photo shows the attachment of an ink inscription written on paper as a record of the conservation treatment that was just completed.
でこれがその、新しく書かれたお裏書きを貼り込んだところです。
So here's a view of that inscription pasted in place onto the roller at the bottom of the mounting.
表張りという、仮張りに貼った後、十分乾燥させた、表具に、中軸を取り付けているところです。
This is showing that after the entire mounting had been pasted onto a drying board facing out for an appropriate length of time so that the mounting was completely dry, the mounting was then fitted with its lower roller rod.
表具の、表目の箇所に、金具を取り付けているところです。
And this is showing that at the top of the mounting where the hanging stave is, copper gilt fittings are being attached.
その金具に、紐を取り付けて、仕上げということになります。
And then to those metal fittings, hanging cords are being attached as the final step in the finishing of the mounting.
仮箱に入れました第二版図を美術品の専用車に積み込んでいるところです。
Then the rolled scroll was placed inside a box, which was put into this art shipper's truck to be returned to the temple.
同じく京都市内のホールを借りまして第二版図をかけてそこで最後の修理後の全体撮影そして部分撮影をしているところです。
And here we are again photographing this scroll after treatment in the same hall that was needed because of the size of the painting as the final step in the treatment process.
新如堂の本堂に戻ってくる仏涅槃図を僧侶の方々が出迎えているところです。
And this is showing the temple officials awaiting the return of the painting to the main hall.
本堂にて修理を終えた仏涅槃図のお披露目、そして法要を営まれました。
The newly remounted Neihan scroll was raised in the main hall of the temple, followed by a memorial service conducted by the priests.
本堂において竹内執事とともに修理完成の記念撮影をしているところです。
And here is a photograph to commemorate the return of the painting to the temple. It shows in front the deacon of the Shinyodo temple, Takeuchi Shitsuji, and members of the Usami Shokakudo team that conserved the painting.
修理後の全体寸法は丈620センチ、幅454.5センチ、そして重量は47キロということになりました。修理前は重量61キロあったところ、修理後で47キロになりまして、結果14キロの減量、ダイエットに成功したということになります。
The overall dimensions of the mounting are now 20 feet 4 inches high by 14 feet 11 inches wide. The weight of the mounting after treatment was 47 kilos. The scroll decreased in weight approximately 14 kilos, or about a third. So one could say that as a result of the conservation treatment, the diet for the painting was effective.
工期は約1年と11ヶ月で、修理期間は2009年4月9日から2011年の2月22日です。
The overall treatment of the painting took approximately 1 year and 11 months and was completed on February 22nd, 2011.
最後に、 このように長い時代を経て伝わってきた美術品は、昔から伝えられてきた修理技術と天然材料を使い、現代の私たちで修理を行います。それにより、傷んだ美術品はよみがえり、次の世代に伝えていくことができます。また、同時にその伝統的な修理技術も次の世代に伝えることができます。将来、その美術品の修理が必要となる時期がきっと来るはずです。それに備えるわけです。これはとても大事なことだと思っております。
The Neihan scroll, with its long history, was treated using a combination of tried and proven techniques and natural materials. With its damages repaired in this way, it has been brought back to life, ready to be passed on to the next generation. At some point in the future, the scroll will require remounting once more. It is important that, aware of this, we use techniques and materials that anticipate and allow for this.
最後にお礼を申し上げたいと思います。今回、このシンポジウムに招待していただきましたボストン美術館の館長様やまたスタッフの皆様方、御礼を申し上げます。特にこのシンポジウムの準備の段階から大変お世話になりましたボストンファインアートのフィリップ・メレデスさん、そして本日の私の発表の通訳をしてくださいましたフリアギャラリーのアンドリュー・ヘアさんは、お二人とも宇佐美小学堂で10年以上勤務され、文化財修復に貢献されました。今回、そのお二人の大変お世話になりましたこと、心より感謝を申し上げます。そして、皆様方、ありがとうございました。
In closing, I would like to thank the director and staff of the Museum of Fine Arts, Boston, for inviting me to attend this gathering and to give this presentation. I would also especially like to thank Philip Meredith of MFA Boston for his help in preparing for my talk, and Andrew Hare from the Freer and Sackler Gallery for translating this presentation. They both spent over 10 years in training and working at the Usami Shokakudo studio. My thanks to them and to you all.
Thank you so much.
I should also just say that the Usami Shokakudo studio is only one of 9 registered studios that by the Japanese government that can treat cultural properties. So we're very lucky to have him here today. Our next speaker is Tanya Uyeda, who is our associate conservator for Japanese paintings here at the Museum of Fine Arts. And Philip Meredith is going to join her at the podium also. Tanya's going to speak. Philip is the Higashiyama Kai conservator for Japanese paintings. And both of them were two of our key conservators in the treatment of this piece, and I'm going to turn it over to them now. And I just want to say that at the very end of all the lectures, we're going to have a Q&A, so if you do have questions, because I do, please hold them till then. And I'm very grateful that our Neihan is only 16 feet high.
Good afternoon. Preserving Nirvana was a project here at the MFA to treat the largest hanging scroll in the Japanese collection, using a gallery as a workspace to conduct the work on view to the public as a part of the museum's conservation and action programming. Painted by a well-known artist, Hanabusa Itcho, in 1713, this monumental scroll measures 16 feet long by 8 feet wide, and as you just saw in Mr. Usami's presentation, it's actually on the relatively small size for this type of painting. Following the same iconography as you saw in the painting earlier, the scene depicts the passing of the historical Buddha into para-nirvana, surrounded by his followers, deities, bodhisattvas, and numerous animals, insects, and birds. Our painting has only 44 different kinds of animals and living beings. This painting came into the MFA collection in 1911 as a part of the Fenellosa Weld collection. It's only been displayed once in the MFA since then because of its size and condition, And as it has been chosen to be included in a larger traveling exhibition highlighting the great collectors of the MFA that is scheduled to go to Japan in the summer of 2017, it was determined to need treatment as it was structurally unsound to withstand that tour. Due to the size of the scroll and the logistics involved in its treatment, we knew that we needed additional assistance to treat the painting. Philip Meredith, on the upper left there, or right next to me, is the Higashiyama Conservator for Japanese Paintings and head of the Japanese section in the Asian Conservation Lab, and myself on the right, represented the two staff from the MFA. Since we're the only ones who treat Japanese paintings here in the institution, we were able to obtain generous support from the Sumitomo Foundation, which allowed us to bring Andrew Hare, who you've already met on the lower left there, and Jiro Ueda, both from the Freer-Sackler Gallery of Art, to come to Boston to work with us at 3 critical stages throughout the process this fall. We also enlisted support from the Chinese Painting Conservation section in our department here at the MFA, and could not have carried out the project without the enthusiastic support of a dedicated team of senior associate volunteer guides who staff the gallery space on a regular schedule, answering questions from visitors for us as we carried out the work. Prior to entering the gallery workspace, we began work on the scroll in our studio earlier this spring, with overall cleaning on the surface of the painting with brushes, a gentle vacuum, and a chamois cloth to remove embedded grime and dirt. We used a dilute animal glue solution, applied warm to stabilize and strengthen the pigments prior to treatment. This was repeated as needed throughout the treatment process. Then the scroll was completely disassembled into its component parts with the removal of the hanging cord and careful removal of all of the elaborate brass fittings, which will be cleaned and reused, including these very large hooks and the fittings that accompany them. They were all carefully labeled so that we know what went where. Even every single little nail, every little brad was saved. This is sort of the reverse of the process you saw with Mr. Usami's lecture. We removed the bottom dowel using bamboo spatulas to separate the layers, and in the process, we discovered a small inscription on the roller with the date of the original painting, 1713, or the 3rd year of the Shotoku era in Japanese. This led us to believe that the roller is original to the painting at the time of its creation. As the border silks are attached to the edges of the painting and then supported by supplementary linings, these outer silk borders were removed by separating the layers and cutting through the joints. The inner borders were removed in a similar fashion, taking care not to damage them, as we were planning to reuse some of these elements. They were peeled away dry, carefully, to minimize any kind of damage. And each was carefully labeled, again, to keep track of what section went where. On the reverse of the scroll were 2 large inscriptions, which we removed, again by separating the paper layers carefully using bamboo spatulas and small knives. These inscriptions informed us that the painting had last been conserved in 1850 and had been dedicated to a temple in the Atago area of present-day Tokyo. We decided not to replace these inscriptions on the back of the scroll after its remounting due to their condition and because they were written on very, very thick, degraded paper. We will be mounting them separately so that they might be preserved and also displayed alongside the scroll if needed. When considering the treatment of a hanging scroll, we evaluate the condition and appropriateness of the mounting silks. This scroll is in one of the most elaborate mounting styles, with 5 distinct borders in lavish fabrics and fittings, which is appropriate for a Buddhist painting. The ichimonji, the narrow strip closest to the painting, and the chuberi, this multicolored gold brocade that encircles the painting, were in good enough condition to reuse. But the inner and outer suji, the narrow unpatterned silk that create these accent lines that completely encircle the painting, and most importantly, the largest border, the soberi, were very deteriorated and could not be reused. In order to accommodate the size of this monumental painting, the mounting is made up of 4 widths of the large pattern damask silk joined together with the pattern aligned. In addition to the insect damage, the silk is badly faded. The flowers would have been a very vibrant pink on a dark blue background. You can see the extensive insect damage to this part of the mounting, which we believe was reused at least once. The top part of this wraps around the hanging stave, where you see the paper. And the damage was such that we did not think the mounting could safely support this very large and heavy scroll. Again, through the generous support of the Sumitomo Foundation and with the assistance of Mr. Usami and his staff at the Usami Shokakudo in Kyoto, we were able to find a weaver specializing in Buddhist altar hangings, since this large patterned silk is very difficult to find even in Japan today. Mr. Ogawa Hiroyasu of Ogawa Weaving on the right and Mr. Sakakibara Makoto of Nishiyama Dye Works patiently listened to our request to produce a replica of the mounting silk as it looks now, that is, in its faded state, rather than a literal reproduction. Mr. Sakakibara dyed the threads to approximate the modeled faded look of the silk, and they wove 4 different sample sections, adjusting each to our comments, going back and forth, to accommodate our desire for a softer, hand-woven look to the pattern. For the better part of a year, our project commandeered a loom in this small workshop, where the looms are built into the very architecture of the building. You can see on the upper left the pattern jacquard that is suspended from the ceiling above the loom, and on the lower right is the loom weaving this fabric. The room is so small, it's difficult to back up to get an image of the entire loom. This is our fabric as it was being woven. In order to reuse the ichimonji, the blue gold brocade, and the chuberi, the multicolored gold brocade, the silks had to be dismantled as they too had been joined just like the larger mounting sections. We used water to soften the paper linings and tweezers to remove the fibers. We realigned and stabilized the fragile fabrics with dilute seaweed paste. And then line the silks with new handmade Japanese paper and fresh wheat starch paste. When reusing silks, they have a tendency to shrink, and as our painting is on paper, this tends to expand. So we had to add a bit of similar silk from our stock to the ends to make sure the sections were long enough, as is shown in this stop-action video of Philip joining the ends to the lined fabrics. After lining the reproduction silk in large sections and drying them on the drying board, the sections were trimmed and joined together using a narrow strip of paper, dyed blue to hide any tiny gaps in the joint. The pattern had to be carefully aligned as well. This is the top and bottom section of the outermost border, which will be cut horizontally when it is time to join it to the painting. Now it was time to prepare the gallery, which was to be both a workspace as well as a gallery space displaying information about the process in the painting. We enlisted the help of the Chinese Paintings Conservation Section, which included visiting fellows from He Qian from the University of Michigan Museum and Hui Xingjiang of the China Central Academy of Fine Arts in Beijing. They were building 2 Chinese-style drying walls, surfaces that we would use to stretch dry and display the mounting sections in the gallery. This is the first of several time-lapse videos shot from a GoPro camera mounted on the wall in the gallery. This is the first time a conservation in action project was treated as an exhibition with explanatory text and supplementary objects included. There was no floor-to-ceiling glass wall separating us, only a low plexiglass border. And on the left, you can see workmen installing the large video screen that played an explanatory video on a 6-minute loop. Behind them, text and images explain the conservation process, and on the right side, complementary art objects and details about the painting iconography are being installed. This coincided with the first visit by the Freer staff as we all came together with the MFA workmen to reconfigure the space. Finally, after covering the table and bringing the painting into the space, we conducted several training sessions with the MFA security staff to enlist their support in protecting this open work area. This shows the gallery workspace about halfway through the process. A high-resolution digital photograph of the painting is displayed in the center of the wall to show the visitors what the image looks like, as much of the time we were working on the back of the painting, and it would be face down, so you would not be able to see the image. You can also see the mounting silk sections displayed on the drawing walls on the right and the left here. And the label rail in the front, we installed to have displays that could be touched and felt of the lining papers on the left and the mounting silks on the right. This angle shows the video screen playing the introductory loop and the label rail beyond it. You can also see the low work tables that we use and the tatami matting that is similar to our lab in the basement of this building. Working on this monumental painting in an unfamiliar workspace on view to the public presented many changes, many challenges, not the least of which was the fact that we would be launching into the most difficult and complicated procedure as soon as we moved in, that is the removal and replacement of the first lining of the painting. Here, we're applying a facing of rayon paper to support the painting during the removal process. You can see the strong air currents from the air handling in the gallery. The time-lapse video shows the rest of the facing process in which 3 layers of paper were successively applied to the surface of the painting. The painting was then turned over, and one team worked steadily to remove the first lining on the painting, including using scaffolding to reach the center areas. We needed damp towels on the surface to keep the painting adequately damp in the strong gallery air conditioning. This is a close-up of that process. You can see them using bamboo spatulas to peel away the very thin paper that's been adhered to the back of the painting. Another team focused on preparing and pasting out the replacement first paper lining on the right. Here we're bringing over the first section of the new lining and brushing it out, all while engaging with the public. You can see Jackie talking to visitors. And we're pasting out the second strip, moving over more scaffolding to apply that. And now here's the final strip of lining paper. The gallery is empty now as it is after hours. This is one of the many processes we had to see through to the end completion, which involved staying after the museum had been closed. When it was finished, we moved the painting over to dry on felt blankets. In between the dynamic finish it in one day stages, there were also stages of material preparation and treatment of the painting. Here you can see Jiro Ueda of the Freer examining the reinforcement of uneven areas on the back of the painting, while Andrew, also of the Freer, joins papers for supplementary linings. Behind Andrew is one of our stalwart gallery guides engaging with the visitors on our behalf. These guides were key to the smooth functioning of this project as they enabled us to focus on our work while explaining what was going on to curious visitors. As you can see, I'm there showing papers to the curious public who would ask questions when the guides were not there, and sometimes when they were. All stages of the treatment took place under the public eye, even challenging ones such as this one, using a large tube to move this newly relined section of the joined-together reproduction mounting silk, having received several of its supplementary linings. You can see when they lift it, you'll see the blue joining strips on the back that hold those 4 widths of damask silk together. One of the major areas of damage, similar to the painting you saw in Mr. Usami's lecture, were numerous cracks and creases caused by the rolling and unrolling of the scroll. These areas must be reinforced before additional linings are added, otherwise the weakened areas will continue to crease and lead to tearing and pigment damage. Narrow strips of paper were applied with wheat starch paste under raking light to better see the creased areas. Lucky for us, there were no large areas of loss in the painting. This shows the gallery at the stage where all the elements have been treated and are ready for joining it all back together as a scroll. This is just before the final visit from our freer colleagues. You can see the painting on a large drawing board on the far right. The photograph in the center looks much smaller in comparison, even though it's about 93% to scale. The reused mounting silks are on the drawing wall on the left, ready to go. Off view, on the far left and under the large drawing board, are the largest sections of the mounting, the reproduction silk. You can also see the inscriptions taken from the back of the scroll lying here in the middle on the table. Joining the scroll back together is a step that must be accomplished in one full day to minimize the distortion caused by the drawing of the overlapping seams. This meant that the day before, we had to cut, trim, and prepare everything so the process could go smoothly. On the left, we're removing the large sections of mounting silk from the wall, and then moving the ladder again to do the same on the right. You can see Philip talking to a large group of visitors. He brings over the old mounting silk to show them and explain why we are replacing it, while Jiro is trimming and joining the long sections of the inner and outer tsuji. Next, the inner borders are being trimmed. And finally, the top and bottom sections of the large outer border are divided. And the long vertical section of the outer border is marked off for cutting the next day. The day of joining, or tsukemawashi in Japanese, has arrived. This day was announced in advance and was heavily promoted on social media. And because we expected, we hoped, to have a large number of visitors, we enlisted additional gallery guides and asked that they try to keep the gallery quiet so we could communicate with each other and focus on the fast-moving process. Again, this process needed to be completed in one full day. To begin, the painting is removed from the drawing board and moved out of the way. We then needed to reconfigure the space to accommodate the growing scroll. So we were waiting for workmen to come and remove the large drawing board. While waiting, Philip is pre-creasing the long vertical borders using the edge of the table. This process helps control shrinkage during the joining process. And then the workmen arrived. We had to put cardboard down because they won't take off their boots on the tatami. We moved the board out, and the tables were moved around. And the process begins by trimming the edges of the painting. The painting is loosely folded in both directions to square it off. And we're ready to start joining. This is an animation depicting the sequence of joining the painting back together. First, the ichimonji is attached to the painting, the top and bottom horizontal narrow strip. And then the first tsuji, the inner narrow border, completely surrounds the painting. The chuberi also comes next to completely encircle the painting. And the second outer tsuji border is applied to all 4 sides. Finally, the soberi, or the outermost border, is applied. In this image, the futai hanging strips, fittings, hanging stave are all attached, but this is attached much later when the scroll is finished into its original format. So here's that sequence on the actual scroll. The process begins by pasting and joining the ichimonji to the top and bottom horizontal edge of the painting. The vertical edges are trimmed, and then the painting is turned face down to apply the inner suji, the narrow, unpatterned border that completely encircles the painting. Seams had to be constantly weighted down to control distortion during the drying. The painting is turned face up to attach the chuberi, the multicolored gold brocade, to all four sides. This is carefully spaced so about 1/4 inch of the inner suji shows. The painting is turned face down again after trimming the vertical edges to apply the outer suji border on all four sides. And then the long vertical sections of the souberi, or outermost border, are added. You can see people coming and going. And here we'll slow it down so we can remind you how large the scroll is and the amount of coordination that needed to happen to manipulate the long silk borders, measuring and remeasuring to accurately space them. Behind Philip and Jiro, you can see the paste bowls with the brushes, holding the wheat starch paste that's used to join these sections. The seams were hammered down using a thick piece of paper to prevent damage to the silk. They were hammered down to ensure strong adhesion. One of the main concerns for a scroll like this is strength, and all of the elements need to hold together. After applying the vertical sections, the final stage, applying the bottom outermost border, is carried out after trimming. And then the scroll was shifted to apply the topmost border. At this point, we're at about 8 hours. 8.5 hours into the day. And we haven't taken any breaks. We didn't think that through very well. So this is the scroll when it was all joined together, but we're still not finished. After a much needed break, we turned it over face down and had to fold over and trim the long vertical edges, and then adjust the painting so that it could be fully supported to dry overnight. After joining the scroll together, the overall structure gets 2 more linings applied to cover the entire back of the scroll and hold it together. You may remember from Mr. Usami's lecture some of these stages. All of the supplementary linings used the aged wheat starch paste and involved the use of the uchibake, which is a pounding brush. This created quite a bit of noise in the galleries, which are normally quiet, but we only received about 1 complaint throughout the fall. Once all of the linings were applied, we shifted the painting along. This took up so much room that the pasting board process had to be shifted outside of the barrier. You can see it on the far right there. And then here the soura, or the final outermost lining, has been applied. You can see the thin blue silk outer covering and labels at the top on the left. That's the top of the scroll. And the silk roller supports on the bottom corners of the scroll, right here. We are preparing to cover it with thick felts to slow the drying after applying all of these layers. And here's the final scroll in its final stages of drying, attached to the karibari on drying board. It will stay on this board through the spring until May, with about half the time being face out and half face in. And in May, it will be removed, the edges trimmed, the roller, stave, fittings, and cord will all be attached. The scroll will be re-rolled, stored in a box, and when it's ready to go to Japan, it will be shipped in a custom crate for the exhibition in the summer. You can see it now in Gallery 178, which is on the first floor of the Asian wing in this building between the Indian and Korean galleries, and I do hope you'll go and see it in person. Thank you.
Well, I'm pleased because we're on time. So our next speaker is Nick Dorman, and he's the chief conservator at the Seattle Art Museum. And I'm so grateful that he's here because he's actually bringing the Korean art to us, because none of our speakers other than he is speaking about Korean art. And it's a big part of Asia. We at the MFA often work with colleagues in Korea. I personally wish we could have a Korean specialist here. I know that's big on my wish list only. But I would like to welcome Nick Dorman and
Thank you, Jackie. Although I don't appreciate coming after that last Oscar-winning presentation from Tanya. You'll see my slides are a bit of a contrast to that. But anyway, I hope that they convey what I need to convey. So thank you and all of your colleagues here at the MFA for organizing and for inviting me today. And I also want to sort of publicly thank all of you in this room, and you know who you are, who've been so helpful to me and to the Seattle Art Museum as we try and care for our Asian paintings, which are, you know, this room is more aware than anyone just how complex and wonderful these objects are. And it, as a non-specialist in a museum that doesn't have a sort of specialist department for this, it's challenging, and it's particularly challenging when you deal with large works of scale, as we're discussing today. So thank you all for all of your input and assistance over the years. So, yes, I'm presenting work that was done by Dr. Park, Chi-sun Park, in Seoul. None of it is my work, none of it's my documentation, so I didn't have control over the slides in that regard either. But she has done a wonderful job, and I will share that with you today. So I'm from Seattle Art Museum. We have 3 museum sites, and we have about, coming to all 3 sites, we have something in the region of 700,000 visitors in a year. Now, many of those people are walking through the sculpture park, but we have something like 450,000 coming through the indoor museum sites. So active program of exhibitions, as well as a permanent collection of around 25,000 objects. And the Asian Art Museum here, I love this picture because it's got real crows in the background to match our Japanese crows on the banners. And the Asian Art Museum was the original home of the Seattle Art Museum. It was built at the height of the Depression in 1933, and it was the sole museum site up until the 1970s, when the severe kind of space constraints in this building meant that the modern art pavilion was generated down at the Seattle Center, where the Space Needle is. And this building was then renovated in the early 90s and opened again as the Seattle Asian Art Museum, which is what it remains to this day. And we're about to undergo a new campaign of building, which will add a gallery to the back of this building. And this is the man who we have to thank for it all. Dr. Richard Fuller, Buckminster Fuller's cousin, was our founding director, and it was his founding collection, named for his father, Eugene Fuller, which kicked the museum off. He was an avid collector. He started traveling after the First World War, where he'd served in an ambulance corps in the First World War, and started traveling first in the Middle East and then to China and around Asia. And that really spawned an abiding passion for Asian art. And you can see here he is in the art storage at the museum, looking at some of his collection there. And you can see he had an interest in works of some significant scale right from the outset. The museum from the outset also had an active exhibition program. This is not the way our insurance company prefers that we ship the art around these days, but this was an exhibition that traveled around the United States after the Second World War, and that was also appeared at the Seattle Art Museum, as did a spectacular touring show that traveled around the States of Korean painting, which came to Seattle in 1958. And again, that was before the Conservators started making noises about light levels and things like that, because we had all of these beautiful top-lit galleries for the perfect viewing of the art, but not for preservation. And this is a view of the museum today with our garden court with some sizable sculpture there. And the collecting field really focused, Dr. Fuller's collecting interest really focused on Asian art, because while we had reproductions of, Van Eyck's and the Mona Lisa in our galleries, he was able to acquire really significant works of Asian art at the time. And he very intentionally pursued that in order to, he had this kind of civic belief that the city needed a public museum, needed a great collection, as well as the exhibit program. So this was his sort of strategy for getting great art in, was focusing on the art of Asia. And here we meet the painting that I'm going to talk about today for the first time. This is the large Korean temple painting, which is in the background here behind this Guanyin sculpture. We don't know when this photograph was taken. It's just a sort of blank photograph in the file. But we know it was after 1945 when this painting was acquired, and we have no exhibition record in-house of the painting being installed until it was conserved in the 2000s. Here's another early picture. I think this is before it came to the museum. This doesn't look like any architecture at SAM, maybe even when it was still in Asia. And here you see the fact that these sort of fragmentary photographs of it half rolled up, this was the way we kind of could look at the image, because the painting is very large. It's about 4 meters, now that it's mounted, it's about 4 meters tall by 3 meters wide. It was a little smaller than that before it was mounted. But you can see there was no ready means to display it. It's just the edges there. It was kept on this rather small roller in storage and could be sort of rolled out half a piece at a time. Our curator who spearheaded this project was our former curator, Dr. Yukiko Shirahara, who's now at the Nezu Museum in Tokyo. She had looked at the painting in storage, identified that it was a sort of priority for her to pursue. But again, of course, because of the scale of the painting, that presents enormous funding challenges. And she had her work cut out, because you've got to show people what you're going to ask them to give money to help you repair. So we actually did a press release about the project, and there's Yukiko and I think that's probably Dr. Park, but I'm not sure. And we rolled it out on the stage at the Asian Art Museum and invited some journalists. And she succeeded in working with the National Research Institute of Cultural Heritage in Seoul, the Korea Foundation, and the Culture Keepers Foundation, Arumjigi, to raise the money from individual supporters as well as the institutional supporters. And those supporters were both in Korea and in the United States. So she really drove a successful fundraising campaign once we got the thing out and could tantalize people with the prospect of this imposing painting being repaired. And here you see a detail of the painting, the quality that Yukiko recognized and was enthused about doing something about. So once the money was raised and we could plan the project, the Korea Foundation curatorial meetings that have happened every fall were the real occasion for Yukiko to pursue her ideas about where to send the painting for conservation. And through the contacts made on those meetings, she came into good contact with a number of conservators and eventually settled on working with Dr. Park. And then we took the painting, again, scale of the painting, rendering cargo transit necessary. So we took the painting on this is a large thing getting delivered to Boeing. And then, our crates would go into the belly of the plane, into cargo plane, and then we would ship the painting over to Korea via cargo. And we're lucky to have a direct connection there. And once the painting had gone, spent several months in the Park Ji-sun's studio with the Jungjae Conservation Center. After several months of examination and analysis, they gathered together a group, including scholars. Professor Chung here is an expert in this field, and myself and Yukiko went along, and we sort of attended this study session with them in, I think this was late 2004. And there we are, our pre-treatment team photograph, and the painting on the floor in Dr. Park's studio. This is Dr. Park here. Discussing the condition, problems with it, ideas about mounting, and one of the things that many of these paintings, in our collection we have other paintings, Korean paintings, which were mounted in a Japanese style, and for this work we wanted to return it to bring it to a sort of traditional Korean temple presentation. So we had sort of extensive discussions with Dr. Park about the appropriate color and border fabric and for that temple style presentation. And here's the painting on her studio again, so you get a sense of the scale. Unlike the ones we've seen earlier on today, this painting did have a lot of missing areas and damages. Here you see, this is just some technical documentation showing their macro shots of the weave of the fabric and the pigment. And then here, the measurements of the strips of the original hemp support. There's some SEM images of the fibers. And all of that was important for the dating. The painting had actually, our earliest records in the museum that were generated when it was acquired back in 1945 suggested that it was much older than it actually is. But the scholars who looked at it with Dr. Park as the treatment was being planned all agreed that it was that they felt it was a 17th century Joseon dynasty painting rather than something earlier than that. You can see here, this is the top of the painting, and you can see, I think, get a sense of the scale of damage in some of these, particularly in these edge areas. Whoops. And we had lifting lifting of the hemp support away from the backing. We had splits and tears along the edges. We had some unidentified chemical staining of the painting, wear and abrasion, and creases that had been locked into the hemp support during the previous mounting and had sort of deteriorated since then. We had lots of patches in areas, and some of which were sort of very different to the original fabric support. So again, apologies for the blurry photographs here from the treatment documentation, but the treatment commenced with consolidation and so securing the flaking paint with the Nikawa glue as we've seen earlier on in the other presentation, and then also cleaning with distilled water, facing the painting by adding sort of support and support papers pasted to the front of the painting to support it while the backing was removed, and the patches were then removed from after the backing. So here you see the edge of one of the halos, and as is, you know, you guys see so often with paintings of this type, the type of pigment that rests over over an area of support can really have a decisive effect on the preservation of the fabric underneath it. And we had areas of the halos where there was almost a complete loss of the support beneath it. So these big patches were on the back. Here you see the checkerboard patch constellation here and just how much loss there was when that was removed. And then large wholesale patches like this one just going over entire areas of the painting. More facing. And then the sort of insets that in these, so inset pieces of fabric in these damaged areas were then removed. Here you can see some of those halos that I was talking about where there's really very little remaining of original material. And these little fragments, little islands of the original material being kind of lovingly held there by the facing paper as new patches are prepared and applied to compensate for those areas. Here you see the strips being added, just as we've seen in some of the other treatments today. Paper strips to support the back of creases, and then backing paper and that wonderful noisy brushwork going on there. Finally, in painting and the addition of, obviously it had no rollers or support rods, so that all had to be fabricated anew, and then the mounting. Now, these pictures are really blurry, but I put them in to give you an indication of, you know, the change with these areas of loss from this dark to this repaired appearance. And then, well, this was, you know, showing the effectiveness of the consolidation of the support, and then just how those areas before and after the treatment of the areas with neutral toning of the corner area, and then the addition of this lovely mellow green edge of the mount, and the same at the bottom here, with a large hole at the bottom being compensated, supported, and mounted here in this nice refined treatment. And the top, from our plexiglass cubes to the finished, oh, sorry, that's actually the bottom end, to the finished area with the roller. Splits and their repair. And then, you know, this, and then the final appearance there. And that's the overall after treatment. And the team. So immediately after treatment, it went here, where these elegant nuns are standing, is the National Museum of Korea, and it was displayed in one of these galleries that were specifically designed for the display of monumental paintings. So we were really glad that the painting could be exhibited in Korea after the treatment, and that was an arrangement that was made early on in the process. So that obviously it hasn't been shown in Korea for a long time, so it was wonderful to be able to share it in that way. And I think we've seen in Tanya mentioned it earlier on that putting up paintings like this is a challenge in institutions, and as I said, we have no record of this being up at the Seattle Art Museum, but since it was treated, it has actually been on display 3 times since that show. Since the treatment. The first time was for a special conservation exhibit that we did where Yukiko and I co-curated this display to showcase the conservation treatment of 5 works of art, including the Buddha. And it was then in a second exhibition which was showcasing the collecting practice of Richard Fuller, and it was also shown a 3rd time at the museum. Subsequent to that project, we were fortunate to be able to work with the National Research Institute again and take 2 other paintings to Dr. Park's studio. This smaller painting, which was returned, you can see here, this was actually another painting that was it was displayable, but it was presented in a Western style. It was in a frame, and we worked with Dr. Park to return it to this traditional Korean panel presentation where it's stretched over a wooden lattice and has these hanging rings at the top of the painting. So that was very satisfying to get this painting back into a more traditional presentation. And we also worked on this really stunning other temple painting, 18th century temple painting. Again, they did very nice technical analysis this time. We got pretty comprehensive X-ray fluorescence information on the pigments. They did some infrared work and lots of microscopy. And here's the painting, again returned to a traditional Korean presentation, a temple painting presentation. And one of the wonderful things about this project was that we also had the opportunity to film a blessing ceremony for the painting. So once the project had been treated, the monks were invited and the painting was blessed, and so we have this documentation of that process too. We also worked with Enrich on cataloging the collection, so we've now performed a complete catalog of the Korean holdings at the museum, and part of that is understanding the condition. And at this point, we've now tied that cataloging work in with comprehensive surveys of our Chinese paintings collection and our Japanese paintings collection. So we're in the position where we can develop a strategic plan for the care of our Asian paintings overall. And that's the end of my presentation. So thank you to all these people, and thank you for inviting me today. Thank you.
Just bear with me, I have to. Okay, well, thank you, Nick. And our next speaker is Jing Gao. He's the Cornelius van der Starr Conservator for Chinese paintings here at the Museum of Fine Arts. And he's going to talk to you about treatment of pieces that we don't own, but the Peabody Essex owns, and there's one of the curators, we helped to get them into a state so that they can be exhibited for shows. So, Jing Gao.
So in 2013, two large Chinese ancestry paintings from a collection of Peabody Asset Museum were brought to the Asian Conservation Studio in MFA for treatment. So these two paintings were painted on silk with ink color and some gold. And the size is about 275 centimeters tall and 130 centimeters in width. So on the label of the two paintings, on the left is the Xiaoxianchun, and the one on the right is the Xiaomucheng. So Empress Xiaoxianchun, died in 1748, was the first consort of Qianlong Emperor. And Empress Xiaomucheng, died in 1808, was first consort of Daoguang Emperor. So both of these, they passed away in more than 200 years ago. So we're talking a little bit of the history of the uses of the ancestral portrait in Qing Dynasty. So in Qing Dynasty, when emperor and empress deceased, their portrait would be painted by the court painter. And this portrait will be displayed and stored in the Shouhuangdian. Shouhuangdian, also called the Hall of Imperial Longevity, which was on north of the Forbidden City. On the text panel is wrote, the Hall of Imperial Longevity was used to worship portraits of royal ancestors and to store caskets of deceased emperors and to hold sacrificial ceremony. And it was also the place to store their personal sales and some of their personal treasures after they passed away. So this picture was kind of like photographed in 1930s when inventory was conducted in the place. So the picture shows the inside the Shouhuangdian. Emperor and the empress portrait were displayed in a proper order. Ritual offering vessels and objects were placed in front of the portrait. So each Lunar New Year, there will be a ritual ceremony held there, and imperial descendants come to pay the respect to their ancestors. This is probably the only picture you can find in the Shouhuangdian before the 1930s. So in 1900, eight-nation alliance fought into Beijing and entered the Forbidden City. The French troops, led by their commander, General Henri Nicolas Frey, stationed in Shouhuangdian. So in 1901, upon their leaving, they kind of plundered the place and took away many antiques and paintings with them. So later, the Fritz family gave some their collection to French government, and these two paintings from Fritz collection later on went to the Xiangmei Museum's collection. So on the label, the Peabody Asset two portraits. So there are some French writings on them. So it's something like the Emperor Qianlong's consort. The Qianlong Emperor's consort on top and the Daoguang Emperor's consort on the bottom. So this two paintings probably took by someone among the French troops, and they took to the Europe. So. Now talking about a little bit of treatment. So the painting have a lot of damages. You can see there are some creases and tears, and some discolorations, and silk losses. Also the delaminations, the mold stain on the side, also sealed, very sealed on the bottom, very dark. So first of all, the tiers have to be stabilized to prevent them extend or break off. The rayon strip banded to the tier in front with funori, and the silk strip put on the back with paste. And then the screw could be handled without causing more damage. Then we disassemble the screw and take the button ruler of the painting and clean the surface with Xiangmei cloth. So the painting uses a very heavy pigment, so we consolidate the pigment with 1% animal glue overall. And in some of the heavy applied the pigment, such as archite and malachite, they have some flaking over there, so we use a little bit heavier concentrate, the 2 to 3% animal glue to set the flaking pigment back. So next is the fun part to clean the mold stains. So there are mold stains along the right edge of painting, which was caused by the water damage. Then the suction plate and the blotter paper were put down under the painting. And then we applied the filter water on the mold area. And stain came off, and not so hard, and taken out by the blotting paper. So after the water went through several times, the stain was reduced quite a bit, but the mold spots still can be seen. So we did some spot tests with some light kind of bleach, like a hydrogen peroxide, and change the pH of the water, try to clean up the mold spot, but that were not very effective. Since the mold had set into the silk, it would be hard to remove. For the long-term stability of the silk, we thought at this point, the outcome should be acceptable. So in this case, probably it's good enough to stop for more cleaning. So at this point, we had a Peabody Asset Museum curator Daisy Wang and the conservator Catherine Carey came over to discuss the treatment. And we look at the cleaning part and some of the other part needed to be done. Then we kind of like apply the facing on the front of the painting and start remove the backing silk. So this is after the backing silk removed. So you can see there's some white section on the back of the face. So when the lining paper was removed, the mouth part of the painting, there were no coloring on reverse, only on the back of the Empress Xiaomei's face. Then we lift a small part of the lining paper to check, and found there was a very thin layer of white pigment lifted with the lining paper. So in this case, we decided to keep the original lining on the back of the face. So you can see the difference. So this on the back of the face, they have a white pigment. You can show through the paper, and this doesn't have the painting coloring on the back of the face. So they probably by the different the painters they painted, because they passed away about 60 years apart. So the painters should be different. They use different techniques. So we use the Taiwanese bath paper for the lining because of the quality and size, which was stronger than Xuan paper and large enough to cover the waist of the painting. We toned the paper color close to the original lining paper, And in the slides, you can see the toned paper sample put under the painting to check the color. And my colleague Xing Cai was dyeing the paper for first lining. So we line the painting with a wet starch paste applied to the dyed paper and brush onto the back of the painting. On one was slide on the bottom here, you can see we trace the outline of the face with put on mylar sheet on top of face, and we trace the outline. Then we cut off the part of the new lining paper using trace line as a guide, so we can leave the original backing paper in place without double it up. So in the red circle, you can see the original lining paper was exposed without kind of cover it up. So on this slide, we turn after the painting was lined, we kind of turn over face up and remove the facing, the temporary protecting the silk surface. So after the painting flattened on the drying board, we can do the infill, the silk infill. You can see, oh, here is the before the infill, this is the after infill. So after the infill, we kind of tone the infilled silk to the coloring, and this after the toning. Now tell me about the mounting. So the two unpaired painting were mounted with a yellow satin strip on the edge and the yellow satin on the bottom. There were no mounting silk on top. On the back screw, yellow silk was used as final backing instead of paper, and the large ivory knobs were on the end of the screw. So you may wonder why they use a yellow color, yellow satin for the mounting. In the last emperor of Qing Dynasty, Pu Yi, wrote in his autobiography, quote, "Whenever I think of my childhood, my head filled with a yellow mist. The glazed tiles were yellow. My chair's cushions were yellow. Everything was yellow. This color, so-called brilliant yellow, was used exclusively by the imperial household," end of quote. So the yellow was a royal color for Qing court, and the yellow mounting was befitting the royalty. And look at the modern designer, use a yellow color for an evening gown. It looks brilliant and royal too. So the front part is the dyeing the silk. So since the fabric used kind of totally different from a traditional mounting, and we have to dye the fabric use different method. So before we dyeing the satin, we consult with our textile conservation, and since they have more experience on the dyeing fabrics. So on their collection of samples, we found this sample kind of very close to the color, what the color we like to have. And the bottom here is a diagram for the dyeing process. And then we mix the dye and the additives and water in a big pot and to dye the fabric. So the first time the color come out not right, it's kind of dark and with some of the spots, not very even. So we did some adjustment, and second time it came out brilliant yellow, looked nice. So the yellow satin was lined with paper and joined to the painting. On this picture, the silk edge was added to the edge add on the painting, and on the bottom here, so we do the final lining silk. So in the red rectangle, you can see this part was the original silk the sergeant reused. And on the end, the kind of like a moldy part we trimmed off, and we add the new silk on the end. So the color matched pretty well. And the screw has a large ivory knobs. Since there's a restriction for transporting the ivory, so we need to make them removable. And Peabody Asset Museum's conservator, Kathleen Carey, suggested use a Teflon tape to wrap around the tenon to make it tight fitting. So in case the painting needs to travel, so the knob can be easily removed. So this is a kind of like a, no, I can't find the Teflon tape kind of wrap around, then make a tight fit. So after conservation and remounting, the condition of the two paintings is stabilized. Hope the two ancestral portraits will be preserved for generations to come. So this is before and after. This is after. And hopefully maybe someday their descendants will come to pay the respect to their ancestors. And their museum kind of preparing for an exhibition for the kind of Chinese kind of portrait painting or something like that. Probably DC Wang can give you more information about that. It's a traveling exhibition. So at that time, the big iron knob probably have to be kind of removed and replaced by some wood or something. Thank you.
Okay, now we've reached our last speaker, Xiangmei Gu, who is the senior conservator at the Freer Sackler Galleries in Washington, D.C. So Xiangmei, at our next conference, you're going first. Just want everyone to know.
Everyone tired. Yeah, good afternoon. Today, I would like to give you a brief introduction on how we repaired and remounted the Sackler Galleries' large size color ancestor portraits. In 1991, the Sackler Gallery acquired 85 ancestor commemorative portraits of the Qing Dynasty. These were original in the collection of the Mr. Richard Petzlaff. Most of these portraits are painted on silk, with mono-colored pigment and a very large size, measuring about 330 centimeters high and 130 centimeters wide. Many were not in good condition. Much of the painting silk was yellowing and had heavy dust and stain. Some as the pigment were lost or powdery. The mounting material were also very dirty, brittle, had mold stains, and damaged or missing parts. If we wanted to exhibit of the preserved these portraits, we had to first repair and remount them so that we could achieve the asset value of these paintings and highlight the ideal effect on the exhibitions, while at the same time permanently preserving them. First, I will describe our thinking and approach to the restoring these portraits. These portraits are rich in the color, and many have the unique mounting formats with the special mounting materials. It was important for us to consult with the curator about our plan for the treatment. Based on the curator's request and our wish to preserve as much of the original as possible, we come up with a basic plan and a guiding principle to keep the original mounting materials. When possible, and replace only those materials that were brittle, dirty, and dusty, too damaged. With this approach, we could restore the life of the portraits while still preserving the history of this mounting. Our treated approach considered the different condition problems of each individual painting, while looking closely at both of the painting and the mount. Important consideration including the length of the time needed for the treatment and the selection and the availability of the materials. We will, as awarding the work conditions, we looked at the benefit and the drawbacks of the range of the treatment option and came up with 3 approaches. One is a minor treatment, 2 the partial remounting, and 3 completed remounting. The first approach I will describe discussion is a minor treatment. In this example, both the mounting and the painting are most stable. The mounting shows the surface soil, stain, and mold, and there is a powdering and the loss of the color on the painting. Before we treat the stain, we had to first stabilize the pigment by concentrating them with a 1% concentration of the animal glue. We noticed that the blue and the green were especially unstable. If concentrating once was not enough, it was be repeated. To treat this large stain on the mounting, we used a 5 to 10% solution of the acidic and the water to wash it clean on the suction table. Because we introduced the moisture to the painting, it was necessary to flatten the painting. We used the traditional Chinese conservation method of the flattening by the pasting the narrow silk strips on the 4 sides of the painting, brush the painting flat, and attach it to the drum board. This slide shows the condition before and after this minor treatment. This portrait shows more detail the loss of the pigment. To restore the color, we use both traditional Chinese pigment and the Western watercolor to impede the loss. We use the Western materials because they have more color and they're similar to the thick pigment found on the ancestor portraits. This slide shows the portrait before and after the impeding. When the minor treatment was not enough to repair the painting, we turned onto our second approach, which was the partial remounting of the painting. We applied the traditional remounting technique to the local area of the painting that allowed us to treat the portrait without separating the painting from the mounting, while still repairing the damaged area. This is a portrait of the Xiangmei, a Qing dynasty general. The painting silk was in good condition, but the pigment was powdery and unstable. The area is greatest concerned, and the most damage was the gold inscription paper. It was brittle, was many severe breaks and the creases. The format of this portrait mounting is simple but unique because it has elegant thin borders around the painting. We want to keep this style of the mounting. We know that if we separating the tri to reuse the mounting material, it would be very difficult to piece to the mounting back together because of the dedicated elements. We decided not to detach the painting from the mounting, but to removing the old inscription paper and remove and replace the overall backing paper. This method proved to be a safe and active way of treating the painting. These are the steps as our treatment plan. Before remove the backing paper, we stabilize the color by the consolidating the pigment with a 1% solution of the animal glue in the water. Next, build the light table so that we could repair the breaks and creases in the golden inscription paper. We made our own setup by placing a clear acrylic border between the two mounting tables with a small light box underneath. We begin by first remove the old backing paper, line the gold inscription paper of the screw. When we use the new sham paper that we had dyed to reline the area, then we repaired the creases with the reinforcement strips and applied one more layer of the backing paper. Next, we remove the old backing paper from the entire screw, leaving the first line paper, supporting the painting and the mounting silk. When we removing the backing paper, we remove the paper very evenly, layer by the layer, in order to keep the thickness the same. In this case, it took more than a day to repair the inscription paper and to remove the backing layers from the entire screw. In order to support the painting during this process, we applied the temporary line paper, make up to the one layer of the sham paper and the one layer of kozo. This temporary lining was applied to protect the joints of the painting and the mounting from the separating during the treatment process. A new final backing for the screw was prepared in advance by the joint two layers of the 6-foot sham paper. Once the original backing paper were removed, the new final backing was brushed firmly onto the painting and the mount. The painting was left to the air dry overnight, and later was attached to the drying board to the flatten. After a period of time, we flipped the painting and paste it face up on the drying board. Area of losses pigment were then painted with a high-quality gold pigment. In this day, the gold color has not changed. These are the images before and after the partial remounting. The third method and the final approach is completed separation and the remounting of the paintings. These are many reasons why it's difficult to completely remount a large format color painting on silk. Because of the size, the line process can become more difficult. It might not be possible to back it with a single sheet of the backing paper. It would need several sheets to be pieced together. Ensure the evenness to the application of the paste, which can be difficult. Another issue is the movement of the color, made of mineral and vegetable pigments in the animal glue, which are sensitive to the water, can be more difficult to control. This is a portrait of the Manchu model woman of the Qing dynasty. Before remounting, the measuring is 353 centimeter high and 135 centimeter wide. The painting silk had creases, but was largely intact without any major damage. The color was stable with a very little loss, but the colors were no longer flashed. It's uneven and cloudy. The condition of the mounting was also poor. The silk faded, stained and brittle, and with creases and losses. Based on this condition of the painting and the mounting, our plan was to remounting the screw. We would treat the surface. We would treat the surface. The painting, repair, and reuse the yellow inscription silk, as well as the top and the bottom dark blue mounting silk, and replace the light blue border silk with the new mounting silk, also with the original format retained. We first cleaned the painting surface with a damp cotton swab and consolidating the pigment. Then we proceeded to wet the painting with the mineral water in order to remove the backing paper. After completely remove the original backing paper, we reline the painting using the 3 sheets of the 4-dyed 4-feet sham paper. During this reline process, we apply the paste directly to the, During this process, we apply the paste directly to the painting, known as a shito. Paste was applied section by the section to the back of the painting instead of the one pass overall, because the painting is large and the paste dry more quickly that way. We brush the paste directly on the section of the painting and immediately apply the sheet of the 4-feet dyed sham paper, carefully to create the smooth of the uniform edge between the sheets. In the second example, when the pigment was also discovered on the backing of the painting silk, we use a line method called photo, where paste is brushed directly to the backing paper. That is supported by linen paper as a carrier. Both line methods could work well, depending on the painting. For the line paper, we sometimes also use a Japanese mino paper because it's thin and strong. The second step is preparing the mounting materials, joining the painting to the mount, and then applying the final backing paper. Once the painting was fully restored, it was placed on the drying board and left for 3 weeks or more to dry. Then painting was then removed from the board, rubbed it with a small amount of the wax on the back side and with a smooth stone. It helped to not scratch the pigment and making the screw more flexible when rolling. Finally, step is install the top and the bottom rods. This image shows the before and after the completed remounting. For installing this screw, we used both the traditional Japanese wooden futamaki and also developed the new light roller clamp made the form that increases the diameter of the roll to minimize stress on the creases and the thick pigments. For the circular gallery rotation between 1996 to 2011, and for the special exhibition of the ancestor poetry in 2001, we have restored a total of about 46 large poetry paintings in this way. The painting was still very stable. I'd like to add a special thanks to painting conservators, Ms. Yuan Li Hou and Ms. Valerie Gui, who worked with me in 1998 and 1999 in restoring about 28 of these Chinese ancestor portraits. The images show the painting before and after completely remounting. Our museum still had a large number of the portraits in need to the treatment, such as these two paintings, which are stained, have the mold, and many deep creases, while also have the very poor and unstable mounting. Now, I'm the training assistant Chinese painting conservator, Grace Jian, and Andrew W. Melon Chinese painting conservation fellow, Zicao Liu, to carry out this work. Finally, I would like to thank the following colleagues and the individuals for their help with preparing this presentation: Angela Hill, Lady Kiskis, Grace Jian, Zicao Liu, Jill Weder, David Hogg, Alison Scott, and Donna Helen. Also, we would like to thank for the following foundations for their support of Chinese painting conservation and the conservators. Thank you. Thank you.
I just want to thank Xiangmei and Jing Gao because they're both great mentors for the young, and so I just think that's an applause right there. So I hope you'll join us for the question and answers. I just want all the speakers to come up here and grab a chair, and we'll be right with you to get your questions.
If you have any questions, just raise your hand and we'll give you a microphone.
Hi. Can you hear me? Oh, good.
Can you say who you are?
Oh, this is, my name is Per Knufus. I'm from the Cleveland Museum of Art. Jackie, this is actually for you. The gallery conditions in the exhibition that you have ongoing now, did you raise that or do you keep it at 50 or? And what implications did that have on
the gallery is climate controlled, so yes, it would be just like our storage for the most part. The problems we did have was that the airflow in there is much quicker. We're not used to having basically wind coming across the surface, and the first 3 days it was sheer hell because we were trying to figure out how to work in there with people. We didn't have our senior associates yet, so they weren't interpreting for us. I was basically handling all the questions. So we had to kind of figure out what the climate was, and so the first thing we noticed that the air handlers, we actually needed to redirect them. So we started working in the galleries on a weekend, so our facilities people really weren't around, and it wasn't until that Monday, Tuesday that we were able to get the air directed up rather than across. And there was only one time when we really wanted to raise the humidity when we were actually doing the joining, and unfortunately we didn't get the what do you call them, humidifiers in there, or dehumidifiers in there. No, humidifiers in there. So that was the only thing I wish we could have done. And it's part of it is because we've never done this before. I mean, we were so open to the public.
Well, beautiful work.
Well, thank you. I'm going to go to this. We'll come back to you.
Thank you. My name is Yurika Wakamatsu. I'm a postdoctoral fellow at the Reischauer Institute of Japanese Studies at Harvard. Thank you so much for organizing this fascinating conference. I learned so much, and I really applaud and admire all of your efforts to make your important work of conservation available and accessible to all of us. This is a very enriching experience for me. I wanted to ask about your understanding of your role as a conservators, did this experience of constantly being interrupted and interacting with visitors somehow change your understanding of your role as conservators? And also, I also wanted to ask about the practice of collaboration among studios. Is this a common practice is it a common practice to exchange ideas and transmit knowledge between studios, between conservation studios in the U.S.? Is that common in Japan? Is there a difference between Japan and the Japanese and American practices of running conservation studios?
I don't know who wants to take that.
I could answer your second question first. This was kind of an unprecedented opportunity to collaborate with longtime colleagues. There are very few of us in Asian paintings conservation in the US, and we all know each other very well, but often we don't have the opportunity to work together. And we do try to help each other we're often sharing fellows and interns and recommending people around. We try to cooperate in the ever constant challenges of obtaining good quality materials and advice and information about treatments and projects. But it's something that we hope that we can continue, and this particular project was a fantastic opportunity to do that. It's not, in the US, we have a very open relationship and a very cooperative attitude towards that. I'd have to say one of the really nice things about it is many of us trained in Japan, and for our Chinese colleagues too, in different areas, in different studios. Collaboration in Japan in particular is not as easy. The studios where we received our trainings are private companies that frankly are often in competition with each other. And we would not have had the opportunity to collaborate with each other in the way that we do here in the US and working in institutions such as this one. Did you want to talk about our role as conservators when we're on view and sharing our work with the public?
Can I just say one thing before Philip says that? The other thing about, I think in the United States, we're all eager to cooperate with our colleagues because there's so few of us, but it's funding. For this, we received an enormous amount of money from the Sumitomo Foundation in Japan to pay for the reproduction silk and to pay for our colleagues from the Freer Sackler to come and work with us. So without that, that would not have happened, even if the heart and the spirit was there. Sorry, go ahead.
It was a very interesting experience to work in an open gallery such as this, because normally our studio space is limited in size. We can't really have people coming and going. We do have visitors, and we like to have visitors who are interested in what we're doing, and we can, but this was the first time we'd done something quite like this. It was, people don't know very much about what we do, and a lot of people who came to watch us came with different interests. Some were interested in conservation, some were interested in Buddhism, and it was very interesting to hear the reasons that they came. We had people who came back several times to see what we were doing, or who'd seen something online and decided to come and see it for themselves. We had one particular person who stayed for the whole day, I think, when we were...
For the day when we were joining the scroll back together, there was a gentleman visiting from New York who was there for 9 hours. He didn't take any breaks either. It's a little worse.
And I have him on GoPro.
As far as we could tell.
Yes. I'd like to add that we do have conservation in general. We find that the public is very, very interested in that, and increasingly we're both under pressure and eager to share our work to the public. The MFA in particular has several spaces where we have treatments going on in spaces that the public can watch us work. This was the first time that we did a Japanese painting, and this was the first time that we were not separated by any barriers to the public. But a lot of our projects do go on under view of the public eye, and many other institutions in the US increasingly are doing that as well. I think it's even in spite of the challenges, it behooves us to be our own advocates and to be able to share our work with the public, with scholars, with interested parties, because it only benefits us to further our work.
And it did make a huge difference to have the volunteer associates working with us who were able to field questions, to engage with people who came into the gallery, because at times we really couldn't look up from what we were doing or take time off to talk with the public. And sometimes we could do that, and it was great to do that as well, but I have to say we probably couldn't have done it without the help of the associates to make it such a smooth operation.
I do have to say that I think all the conservators who are working on View, the Freer as well as the MFA, I think it brought out something in them that they didn't even know they had either. Because the first week, I have to say, we were all sort of figuring it out for ourselves, for the project, but it's not only that I think the public got something out of it. I know each and every one of those conservators got something out of it. I definitely got something out of it. I'm gonna get off the clamped, so we're going to Shiho.
Hi, my name is Shiho Sasaki. I'm from Asian Art Museum of San Francisco. My question is quite simple, and to Mr. Usami-san. 今日はありがとうございました。大変勉強させていただきました。My question is the drawing process of such huge, oversized paintings. How did you manage that challenging stage of the drawing? Normally, those are pasted onto the Calibari board, and that's I see in the gallery. The Nehanzu, the MFA staff have been working, but I just can't imagine how did you tackle that stage.
日本語で返事をさせていただきます。私の、スタジオは、できましたのが昭和62年に、新しいスタジオになりました。今から約30年前のことになりますが、その
I can just translate as we go along. Mr. Usami is explaining that his studio was renewed, rebuilt in about 20... About 30 years ago, his working studio was completely rebuilt and remodeled.
その時のいろいろと新しいスタジオを作る時に、将来的なことをいろいろと考えてました。
And so at that time there was an opportunity to sort of modernize the studio and rethink the ways that they could work and what sort of facilities they could provide.
今日の、スライドで出したように大きな作品が入ってきた場合どこから入れるのかというのが一つ、ウィンチで挙げたことを今日紹介させていただきました。
For example, you may have seen one of the photos with bringing in the very large painting. They have a trapdoor in the floor that allows them to bring up the scroll painting with winches and into the working space rather than up a stairwell.
それと、先ほど質問いただきましたカリバリのことですけれども、さてその大きなものが来た場合どこでどういうふうにカリバリしようかということを考えた結果、作業は畳の上で作業台を置いてするんですが、その大きな場合来た場合は、全部畳を上げたら畳の下に全部そのカリバリのような板を引き詰めるというそういう、プランを考えました。
And the question of drawing large objects, instead of having a Karibari board which is moved around the studio, the tatami matting is removable, and beneath the tatami matting is a surface which can be used for drying objects on.
ですから今回の第2ハンズのカリバリの時は、その作業場の畳を全部上げてそこ一面に、仏ネハンズを貼って、カリバリをしました。
So in the case of the Neihan painting that you saw today, all of the tatami mats were removed, and the surface below that was used as a drying surface for the scroll and its mounting.
それでよろしいでしょうか。
Does that answer your question?
My name is Daisy Yo Wang. I'm curator of Chinese East Asian art from the Peabody Essex Museum. And I just want to express my deep appreciation to the MFA Asian Conservation Studio, because we were very, very lucky to be able to work with Gao Jing as well as Xin Chen of this conservation project, the two empress portraits. I think just from curatorial point of view, I think it's not just about preservation of cultural heritage, but also is a process of research, because this is actually when Jing and Xin Chen conserved the two paintings, this was the first time this type of portrait, the portrait of Chinese emperors of the Qing dynasty, first time under sort of the kind of microscope type of research, because I have been talking to my colleagues at the Palace Museum, where many of these type of portraits has been stored. They have never conserved a painting like this. So during the conservation process, it was a wonderful process of discovery. We looked at the title slip very carefully and deciphered the French inscription. We were able to also look at the character. There is a character set up proper left in the title slip, which help us to really to look deeper into the display context. And also I think that's the case for many Japanese Korean paintings as well in terms of the research. So right now we are very, very excited after the completion of this conservation project, the two portraits. We're now working with the Friends Sackler Galleries and the Palace Museum in Beijing to organize a traveling exhibition featuring empresses of China, and these two portraits will be the centerpiece. Will be held at the Peabody Essex Museum fall 2018 and travel to Washington, D.C. 2019. So I want to say a big thank you to the wonderful team at MFA Boston. Also, I have a question, which is a question into the weeds, because Jing Gao, you mentioned that during the conservation process, these two portraits, when you're actually taking off the backing, the support on the back, you actually discover that one portrait, the face of the empress does not have painting on the back. But you also found that the other painting, actually, there is white pigment, looks like a white pigment on the back. So I was wondering whether you could share a little bit more about, you talk a little bit about the decision not to move the backing paper, but also since Xiangmei is also here, and also you conserved a tremendous amount of Chinese portraits. So I just want to just have a quick question about this kind of the, painting on the back, whether there is any research about material, the reasons for that, and also perhaps there is some kind of, maybe there's a period style, whether this is 19th century practice in China, not 18th century. Thank you.
So usually for the Chinese painting, very heavily kind of pigmented. Usually they put some the white pigment on the backing, on the reverse. So, but these two paintings, just only the one was the portrait, the head with white pigment on back. So you can see from the front appearance, one is with the white pigment on back, the face look very white. The other one look different. So these two paintings kind of 60 years apart. So the painter have used different kind of technique on the painting. So usually the pigment on the back kind of reflect to the front. You can see the face look different. So it's more kind of come out more. And so when we kind of remove the backing paper on that part, so we leave a little bit the backing paper, so we saw some of the white pigment kind of attached to the lining paper. So if the lining paper on the face is removed, the front appearance probably will be different. So it will be probably change a little bit the color. So we decided to keep that on that place, not remove it.
Do you want to add anything, Xiangmei?
Yes, just Jing Gao is said about that, because ancestor portrait painting, we had excuse me, we did a lot of the remounting paintings. The some painting is backside had a pigment, white pigment. Also, it's some is not only white pigment on the face, most of the face. They make the front is more beautiful, thick. not very thin, the colors. So they support the white pick on the backside. But another, something like a dress, we did a remounting the painting, some of the, and last time I had for the one slice, so the pigment also the blue, also dress, the complete blue colors, but the front is not only blue one color, so many different colors front drawing. So each depended, I think, painting by the artist. Then also they use, how say, pigment that, how say that quality is different. Some painting the pigment are very stable, and some painting is not very unstable, just put like a powdered. So depend on what Jing Gao said, backside, when we remove the first layer of paper, it's very important, this technique. Means if the backside has the color, how the first layer has the backside has the color, then we decide not to have to remove. If the not something has the color, we're going to remove. This depends, I think, on the painting silk. Some painting silk is very tight. That's fine. Some painting silk is very loose. The loose painting silk, then that's kind of case painting we usually keep, very carefully think apart, not just immediately remove the backing paper. We'll see after you start to remove the first backing paper, then first layer paper, we'll check it. But sorry. Our Florida sacred painting, mostly I just, the one is, which I saw that I talk about recent 2011, we mounted just a very small part. I left half layer the piece of paper because the backside had the gold pigment. They supported. So when I remove just a piece of paper had very little the gold pigment, then I just keep it, and then half is the paper I removed, and then half paper just keep it. Then because painting is large, so half layer is doesn't matter, you will become the different thickness, still fine. That's enough.
If I could just mention very quickly, that technique of applying pigment from the back on a silk painting is a very, very old technique. It does come from China. You see it in Japan also through the ages, beginning with Buddhist paintings, but it's a very actually common technique for paintings on silk.
This will be our last question.
My name's Philip Bloom. I teach Chinese art at Indiana University. I had two questions, one related to the back painting, and then one sort of more general question. With regard to back painting, when those works were originally created, was the silk already mounted on some sort of backing paper? So is the versopigmentation like literally applied through to the backing paper? Well, actually, I realized that was a totally stupid question. You can't paint from the back if it's already mounted on backing paper. But in relation to that, I notice sometimes, especially with Korean painting, it really does seem like the painting is already mounted on paper when it's painted. Is that the case or not? And then more generally, when you're approaching conservation, are there different kind of conservational approaches that you take for Chinese, Japanese, and Korean paintings? Is there a sort of different philosophy of conservation that you would be trained in depending on the cultural context in which you receive your training? Thank you.
It's difficult for us to answer your question on Korean painting because so few of us actually work on them. We did work on a piece a few years back which was on a very coarse silk support, and so coarse that there was no painting on the back simply because you wouldn't have seen anything through the very dense, thick weave of the fabric. It looked like hemp, but in fact we analyzed it and found it was silk. Other than that, does anyone have anything else to add about Korean
maybe you could approach it in a
paintings and
general.
Oversize?
Asian paintings, are they lined before they're painted?
Right. Usually, The silk is mounted on a very simple wooden frame, unlined, and would have been painted in that way, so you have access to the surface and the back. Logistically, for a really huge painting, you can imagine what that means, but technically you have access to the front and the back, and then it's lined with paper and then put into some kind of mounting. Obviously, as we've been discussing, that complicates future conservation treatment, because in removing those lining papers, you run the risk of damaging the painting, the pigments that are adhered to the back. But in regards to cultural traditions and training, many of these techniques, because their origins, the styles, the techniques, the sequence of materials applied and so on, all have their origins in China and have made their way to Korea and Japan over the ages, and have sort of grown and varied in various ways. But there are obviously many, many similarities and many commonalities. And I guess, all of us have our various sources of training, but that they're very similar. And we, again, working in an institution like this, where we have colleagues in close proximity who work on similar things, and we're able to help each other out very easily. And that's kind of the joy of that situation, where the similarity both in the materials and in our training, and then our literal physical proximity, means that we can work together quite easily, in fact.
If I can just say, I think philosophy-wise, it's similar here in the United States. But if you say you go to China or Japan, sometimes, say, the in-painting, the idea of how far you take that, or do you do it at all, differs from culture. So I think that's more of, it's the culture that's treating the pieces. It's their philosophy more so than the actual, conservation. It has more rooted in the culture that you're working in. Is that fair to say? Okay. Well, I think that's the last, and I really appreciate you all coming, and thank you.